This is part 2 of LINQ to SQL tutorial. In this video, we'll discuss performing insert, update and delete using LINQ to SQL. This is continuation to part 1. In part 1, we discussed performing a select, so please watch part 1 before proceeding. We want to have 4 button controls on this web form. When we click the first button, we want to load all employees from the employees table. When we click the rest of the buttons, we want to perform insert, update and delete respectively. So let's see how to achieve this. Let's flip to Visual Studio. The code that we've got here at the moment only loads male employees. We want to load all employees. So let's change the code accordingly. Employees property is going to give us all the employees. Now let's extract this piece of code into its own method, and let's name the method getData. Alright, now let's include a button control on this web form, and let's change the text on the button to getData, and let's also change the ID to btn getData. Let's double click the button to generate the click event handler. Now let's actually call this method within the button click event handler instead of the page load event. Alright, now let's drag and drop another button control, and let's change the text on the button to insert, and let's change the ID of the button to btn insert. Double click this to generate the click event handler. So when we click this button, we want to insert a new employee row into employees table. Alright, now anytime we want to do anything with the database, we have to use this SampleDataContext class instance, because that is the main entry point into the database. So the first thing that we need to do is create an instance of this class. So let's wrap this inside and using clause so that it gets closed automatically. So let's create an instance of SampleDataContext. Let's call this dbContext equals new SampleDataContext, and let's create a new instance of the employee object. So employee, let's call this newEmployee, and we need to populate all the properties of the employee object. Now we don't have to supply a value for the ID property. That is because within the employees table, ID column is an identity column, and for the identity column, SQL Server is automatically going to compute the value when we insert a new record. So we don't have to supply a value for this property. So let's supply values for first name. So let's say first name is Tim, and let's say last name is T. Let's set gender to male, and salary to 55,000, and let's set department ID as 1. Okay, so we have the employee object. So dbContext.Employees, so this property is going to have the collection of all employees. So to that collection we want to add this employee object, and in order to do that, we're going to make use of this InsertOnSubmit method. And if you look at the IntelliSense, notice that it is expecting an object of type employee, and we have the employee object here. So let's pass it as an argument. Now this call is going to only insert that employee object into this collection, but we want that to be saved to the database table, and in order for that to happen, we want to call the SubmitChanges method. And once the employee record is inserted into the table, we want to refresh the data that is displayed within the grid view control. So let's call this getData method. So what is this getData doing? It's loading all the employees from the database table. So after we perform the insert, we want to call getData method. Alright, so with all these changes, let's run this. And at the moment, if you notice SQL Server employees table, we've got 7 records. So let's click this getData. So we have all those 7 records there. Now when we click insert, Tim record should be inserted. And let's quickly check the database table. So notice that we have that Tim row within the database table as well. Alright, now let's perform an update. So we want to change Tim's salary from 55,000 to 65,000. So let's see how to do that. So the first thing that we need to do is have a button control. So let's drag and drop the button control, and then let's change the text and ID properties. Let's change the text to update and the ID property to btn update. Double click on it to generate the click event handler. Let's copy and paste this code and then change it as required. Alright, so we don't want a new employee object, so we can get rid of that. Now what we need to do is load Tim's record from the database table into the application, and dbContext.Employees is going to give us the list of all employees. From that we want a single employee object, so I'm going to make use of SingleOrDefault method, and we need to specify the ID of the employee. So let's specify that using a lambda expression. Now if you look at Tim record, the ID is 8. So this SingleOrDefault method is going to return us an employee object. So let's store that in a variable of type employee, and let's call the variable employee. So now this employee is holding Tim record data. Now what we want to do is change salary. So employee.salary equals 65,000. Now what we need to do is submit the changes to the database table. So we can get rid of this line. So Tim employee object is already present within that collection. So now this is going to hold a reference to Tim object, and we are changing the salary of Tim, and then we are submitting changes. So LINQ to SQL is automatically going to update Tim's record. So let's look at that in action. Let's run this one more time. Get data. So at the moment Tim is on 55,000. Let's click update, and notice that Tim's salary is now updated to 65,000. Now let's see how to delete employee's record. So let's drag and drop another button control. Let's change the text to delete, and let's also change the ID to btn delete. Double click this to generate the click event handler. The same idea, let's copy and change this code as required. Okay, so we need to load the employee record that we want to delete. So we want to delete Tim's record, so the ID is going to be 8, and dbContext.Employees, again this property is going to give us the list of all employees. From that we want to delete Tim employee object. So this is going to only remove the employee instance from the collection. If we want to persist the changes to the database, we need to make a call to submit changes. So let's run this and see if Tim's record is deleted when we click that button. So get data, we have all the employees there. Now let's click delete. Notice that Tim's record is gone. Let's quickly check the database table. So Tim row is gone from the table as well. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.